based on the projects that you've been a part of and the customers that you've advised, what are the most important things that organizations who are planning to move to Employee Central Payroll need to plan for and or do? And what are the best practices you've seen or tools that you find are indispensable to that migration project?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because I've worked with net new to SAP, so they had very little they were bringing across, obviously, but more of on-premise customers now moving over to Employee Central Payroll. One of the big things that I see missing a lot of times is history and how you access that history. So if you're an organization that's currently on-premise, you're moving a lot of times, kind of like Judy pointed out, HR and payroll will be the first move to the cloud for some reason, and then it'll be followed by a move to S4 or S4 HANA Cloud. And it's one of those things where, what do you do with all that old payroll data? So you've been live since the beginning of the 2000s. What do we do with that? A lot of the SIs, when they come out and bid, will only do current year, maybe 1 year previous. And I see that as an issue long term, because now how do we go back and get that information, especially if our finance system is only going to be around for a year or two and then they're going to move. They're not necessarily going to want to bring all the payroll data. HR has the same thing. How do we go back and look at some of that history? On the EC side, it seems like because you have to build out all of that configuration, it's a little bit more difficult to get a lot of the history. So we have to figure out how to do that. One of the things you can do on the payroll side, though, especially if you use some of the third-party tools that are out there, is you bring all the configuration across. You can update that like we talked about, make things a little simpler, but you can bring all of your payroll history. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And then we can report off of all that all the way back. Again, if you use the standard SAP tools, there's not a lot of help with the history of the payroll results. There's tools out there that are available that's a little more cumbersome. Use Easy Migration, those types of tools. You can bring a lot of that across very easily.
Yeah, and you know, I give the plug for Easy Migration. You obviously can choose the amount of history and the level of everything you want to bring across as well, which is important. Judy, what did Swagelok do when it came to, we're talking about history and we're talking about migration? What was your approach with that?
It was kind of a quick and dirty, to be honest with you. So we went live in 2018. So what we did was we loaded a whole payroll up for 9 months worth of, as if it were one payroll. Okay, so if you went out to our system and you looked at 2018 and you looked at September, it was the whole year in one payroll. And then from there, you know, we each payroll after that. And so that way, when we got to the end of the year, our W-2s were correct and it was all loaded in appropriately on ECP. So we had it all. You just needed to be careful because the way we stored our data was really Excel sheets, which is kind of an awful and embarrassing thing to say, but that was what we decided to do. And so you need to be careful when you go back to that Excel that you don't run any kind of W-2 on 2018, because that did not include the last couple months of the year. So if you wanted a 2018, you had to make sure you were on the new system to do that. So I felt like we were kind of slapping it in and getting it there. Can we access it? Yes, we can. It's not ideal. And certainly it would have been an awesome thing to have it all there in our payroll system in the past in the new system, but we flop back and forth between those files and our current system. We really don't get a lot of demand for those old files, you know, so it's been a few years since we've been live, so we really don't have to go back to those too often unless we get maybe a subpoena or something like that. So for the most,
We've lost Judy again. She may have cut out there. You know, it's interesting. She mentioned you kind of went away for a second, Judy. It looks like you're back.
oh, okay. Did you hear anything that I said there?
Yeah, after subpoena, we kind of lost you.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so we don't really go back to it too often. So we pretty much stay with our current system, but we do have access to it if we need to from a legal standpoint. But I mean, our policies pretty much don't keep it after 7 years anyway. So eventually it's not going to be that useful for us.
Yeah, and there's usually that threshold from a compliance perspective that customers have, but it's something you've got to take into consideration when you're doing this project is what is that threshold? What do you need to have? And how are you going to access that data if you have to, if you get that subpoena that you mentioned, you know, that. Imran, anything you want to add to this question?
I think it's, it's always a good thing for customers to scope it out and understand what it is they want to get out of it, right? And the legal aspect is obviously the biggest one, right? And so if you look at like historical results and being able to get the information you need, that's a key consideration, right? And so take a look at that first and foremost, but don't overcomplicate it either, right? And so if there's stuff that, you just haven't used, don't need to use, and I guess don't be a hoarder either, if at all possible. So yeah, I guess I'll just add that.